Yes, I can.
Perfect.
And I can see our YouTube live stream is being initiated. So just give me a sec. All right, we should be live here, and I'll also report. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for really our first open digital health research conversation. Somebody, if you could just keep your microphones muted for now. I think somebody.
Actually, it seems that I can mute people, so I just
okay, great. Thank you.
Genevieve.
That threw me off a little bit there, but yeah, thank you everyone for joining. So this is one of our first research conversations from Open Digital Health, and the whole idea behind these events is to provide an opportunity for all sorts of people working in the space of open digital health to network, hear about interesting talks, and just have a kind of a cool conversation in an informal space. We have all sorts of different types of events. If you've been to our websites, we have research discussions, we have like sort of more keynote type of events, and we also offer some workshops. But yeah, to not go any on further, it's my great pleasure to introduce you today to Professor Guillaume Chevance. I hope I pronounce it right. I might not, but Guillaume is a professor at Barcelona Institute for Global Health and the head of the eHealth group at this university. He has a background in sports science, and he is very much interested in the design of eHealth interventions, in particular in the context of climate change. So today's presentation, you can see the title, he will talk about thinking health-related behaviors in a climate change context. So without further ado, I hand it over to Guillaume.
Thank you, Sebastian. Hello, everyone. So it's a great pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon for me, but maybe it's not the afternoon for all of you. So let's say today with you. And we were discussing with Sebastian that we can keep this presentation informal. So please, just interrupt me when you want to ask a question during the talk. That's perfectly fine. I can manage the question directly during the presentation. So yeah, very quick on the background, and just can you confirm that you see my slides moving? It's okay? Perfect. So I see myself as an interdisciplinary researcher. I'm interested in behavioral medicine topic, digital health, and also like methods around these two different things. I have a background in sports sciences and psychology. I did my study in France, and then I moved to the US for a postdoc in digital health with the team of Eric Eckler there at the UCSD. And in 2019, I started to take a turn in my research about climate change. And thanks to one of my close friends and colleague, Paquito Bernard, who is assistant research professor in Montreal, à l'Université du Québec à Montréal. And I don't know if you have seen this paper, but in 2019, Paquito published this brief paper that was like a kind of viewpoint on how health psychology can contribute to the climate change topic through this name of Anthropocene, which is basically the recent human history that acknowledge the impact of us humans on the planet. And it happened that at this same moment, I had the opportunity to join this institute, which is Global, and it's the Institute for Global Health in Barcelona. And most of my colleagues actually are environmental epidemiologists working around the topic of like the health effect of pollution, planetary health, climate change. So that was kind of a great moment for me to join this institution and to try to, start to bridge a bit different fields together. So it's not an easy task, but just to say also that I hope this talk can motivate you starting to think about the bridge that you can do in your research if you are interested in that topic of climate change. And I will say that we might not need to be a specialist And, it's just about collaboration and starting to work with the good person. And I think that our field, so behavioral medicine, digital health, health psychology at large, can really contribute to a lot of climate change stuff. So, it's also a call for collaboration, this presentation today. So let's jump into the topic. I'm not sure about what you know and like how much you are aware of the different news in terms of climate change. So I just would like to start with one of the main key messages of the last IPCC report, which is like the gold standard in terms of assessing and monitoring climate change, we can say. And basically what we can observe is that over the last years, we have seen like a very sharp increase in global surface temperatures. And which is important to understand, and as you can see on the picture, is that, okay, there are natural variation in the climate from like a very long time, but what we are observing right now is very different from what we observed in the past before. And it's very like occurring, as you can see, in a very short period of time. So right now we are approximately at +1 Celsius degree overall on the planet, comparing to this reference period. With very strong variations if you look at the temperature of the sea or the temperature of the land, and also, for example, on the poles. So in northern Canada, for example, there are some parts of the Canada that are already like 4 degrees above their reference period, like some 100 years ago. So, again, this picture is important because it's quite sharp and it's happening in a very short period of time. Recently, I was listening to a podcast from one of the most influential climate activists and scientists, we can say. So it's Dennis Meadows. I will show you like a book that he wrote just in the next slide. And this Dennis Meadows was explaining that actually climate change, it's important to understand, is a symptom of growth. So as you can see here, it's a picture adapted from a paper by Stephen about the concept of Anthropocene that I told you. After the Second World War II, we can see a very sharp increase in a lot of human activity indicators. And it's very important to understand. It's quite simple, but at least for me, it took me time to link everything. Basically, the more we have human activity, the more we are producing greenhouse gas emission, and the more we are accelerating this issue of climate change. So the point is that there is always like a double sides of growth. There are for sure positive things. Education is one. Social security is one, all the positive improvement that we experienced during this past year, but it's also coming with a lot of negative aspects. So more and more energy use, we are more and more in terms of populations, more and more utilization of fertilizer, pesticides, etc., etc. And actually what we are observing today is really a symptom of the growth that we experienced over the last years. So here, just a small note. I was observing this claim we can say on the Open Digital website, and since I understood this point about growth and climate change, it's always triggering a red flag for me. And I would say that it's quite difficult to tackle the climate change issues that we are right now in a system where everything will grow. So probably, and here I'm referring to this book by Dennis Meadows, the one I told you just before. Probably we have to start thinking about like a post-growth economy and how we could slow down some of our activities, increase other activities, but instead of trying to grow, it's everywhere and every time, trying to reach more like steady state and also maybe decrease some of our activities. So I also recommend this book if you want like a global approach on this question by Catherine Zewert, which is related to the health system and also about like the finitude of our planet and the fact that we are in a closed system. Our planet is a closed system and we can't go infinite in the consumption of everything. So that was just a brief note on this. And for the topic of digital health, I did a presentation thanks to Olga Persky that invited me in the ethical consideration in digital health research. And I'm talking about these things about digitalization and climate change, and also in the context of health. So I will not discuss this today, but if you are interested, you can check on my blog. There is a YouTube video, and there is also this article that we wrote some months ago. So I'm coming back to this this climate change point, and basically today here we are. So on the left you can see that I'm still referring to the IPCC framework. You can see that we have like the different scenarios up to 2100 for the emission of greenhouse gas emission. So CO2 and other gases like methane, nitrous oxide, and sulfur dioxide that are combination of greenhouse gases. And so here we are. And it's not difficult to understand that we are at a turning point and at a very important period of our civilization, let's say. And because as you can see on the picture on the right, the different scenarios and the different trends that we will follow in the next years will really have like a different impact on the temperature increase. So as you can see, like for the medium scenario, we will be around like 2.5 degrees more like global surface temperature on Earth by 2100. So yeah, that's quite of the challenge that we have today. And maybe something you can notice, because again, I don't know like how much you are aware about that climate change point, is that as you can see, the temperatures will not decrease, will not come back to the pre-industrial level, because there is a very big delay in the impact of greenhouse gas on temperatures. So it means that what we are emitting today will have an impact in 40 years approximately. So even if we cut everything today, we stop using anything that produce greenhouse gas emission, which will be very, very, very difficult, we will still have an increase in the temperature, because it's a long-term process. It's a big machine, obviously. So it's not something we can cut like today. So it's becoming really, really urgent. The point about the temperature is that there are a lot of scientists saying that actually it could be really tricky for us as we live right now in our civilization to keep like a stable system at 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius. So I really recommend this article by Stephen, which is a classic on this question. And as you can see, using a kind of complex system figure, the risk today is that we could get trapped in a very pathway that will be totally unmanageable. And why? It's because there are a lot of feedback loop in the climate that we don't want to reach. So for example, there is one which is very easy to understand. The more the temperature rise, the more the Arctic sea ice melts. And as reflective ice disappears, darker ocean water absorbs more heat, so it's getting more hot. And there are a lot of feedback loops like that exist. And it could be really tricky to escape from this attractor if we are unable to act very quickly. Okay, so it's not only about the climate, it's important also to understand, and I want to share that with you because it took me some time to get it too. Here it's a schematic view of the concept of planetary boundaries. And as you can see, we are very bad into biosphere integrity. We already crossed the boundaries for biosphere integrity. We are like kind of correct for climate change. I mean, still manageable. And also for soil artificialization or like biochemical cycles. So it's very complex because if I take like a very explicit example, the past year we have seen a lot of debates in France about whether we should cut or let's say destroy a big part of the forest and the trees near Bordeaux to put like solar panels. And in the climate system, there are always rebound effects. It's very difficult to do like something because, okay, if we put like solar panels, that's great. We will produce like more, I don't like the term clean energy, but well, let's use clean energy because it's shorter. But at the same time, we will do it by destroying a lot of biosphere, like biosystem, by killing like a forest or what. So it's always tricky again in the climate change domain to address all the issues together. And also it's why I told you about these growth things before. It's really a symptom of the way we live right now. So again, in terms of health, you have a lot of articles in the literature stating how much climate change could be impactful for health with pollution-related illnesses, reduced food quality and quantity, and obviously security at the end, freshwater scarcity, violence, propagation of infectious disease, and a lot of very nice things that we we would like to avoid as much as possible. So today, I would like to discuss the implication and also the opportunities that our field, let's say like behavioral medicine or again psychology, the role that this field can play toward this question of climate change. And yes, so it's basically my presentation will be organized around the paper, and you can find the preprint online, and I will go into this preprint. And by climate change, we will focus on different things: rising average temperature, increasing occurrence and intensity of extreme weather events, air pollution, and rising sea level. So let's jump into it. And again, if you have a question, do not hesitate to speak out. So the paper is organized around different sections. I will not go into the detail of all sections. I prefer to give you, let's say, a big picture today, and then maybe during the discussion we can go a bit more into each aspect of this. So the section 1 is about the impact of climate change on health behaviors. We did a kind of narrative review on that, and I would like to share some of the results with you. The second section is about health behavior and different concepts that are important. So climate change mitigation, adaptation, and amplification. The third one is a kind of model which integrates section 1 and section 2 together. And the section 4 is a note about health equity, because maybe more in the climate change domain than other domain, there is really like the health equity issue to have in mind when designing intervention around health behaviors and climate change. So let's jump into it. Again, as I was telling you, I don't want to go into the detail, but here it's a table that we developed for the revision actually of the preprint. So you will not see this version in the last preprint I share. The preprint is under a last round of review in Annals of Behavioral Medicine, and we hope that it could be published soon. And basically, you can see that we try to summarize the literature about the effect of rising temperature, extreme event, air pollution, rising sea level, and different type of health behaviors, heating behaviors, physical activity, sleep, substance use, preventive care, and water consumption. The point, very like globally, is that climate change is a threat for most of these health behaviors. And because climate change is increasing, this threat could be like an increasing one also, and an increasing like important factor for health behaviors. In terms of the mechanism, here you have a picture that we developed also as part of this article, which is showing the relationships between climate change and the impact of climate change on health behaviors. And in terms of the mechanism, we identified different type of effects. So we can say like direct and indirect effects and behavioral shock versus like secular trends. And this is from the literatures we read on this topic. So direct threats are relatively easy to understand. Let's say that you have like one extreme weather event on your tennis playground, Nikos, and your tennis playground is destructed, and you can't play tennis anymore. And actually, that sounds fun like that, but there are some places in the world where rebuilding sports infrastructures is becoming more and more challenging, because extreme weather are augmenting and their occurrence are increasing, and it's becoming like very, very expensive to rebuild and to maintain some sports infrastructure. Other direct threats include like the direct physiological effect of heat on our physiology and sleep and physical activity. And indirect effects in the paper that I'm presenting today are mainly related to mental health. So we found a lot of articles in the literature speaking about how, for example, extreme weather events can impact anxiety, for example, or trigger some type of post-traumatic stress disorders, which then result in decrease in physical activity or bad sleep. So there are different types of effects like that. Then the second thing that I wanted to discuss in terms of the mechanism and how climate change can shape health behaviors are these differences in terms of time scales between things that are happening in a very short time period. So like heat waves, for example, or hurricanes that can disrupt our behaviors for a short period of time, and also something which has been well less studied in the literature, that are like secular trends. So how basically like the progressive change over like 10 years, 15 years might influence our physical activity, our sleep, and different things, which is more like an unresolved puzzle for now. So let me know if it's clear. Basically, yeah, again, if you want to have like a lot of different examples for each section, I recommend you to check our articles. But basically, in terms of the mechanism that link climate change on health behaviors, it's most of the time either direct or indirect, and it's occurring in different time scale, behavioral shock or secular trends. Maybe one note on the picture to help you understand. So here you have the different climate change outcomes that I told you: rising sea level, increased temperature, and their association. And here you have like different type of individual behaviors and also like structural factors related to these behaviors. Because if you take aging behaviors, for example, there are a lot of research in the literature about the impact of climate change on the food system or on food production. So it's only indirectly related to individual behaviors. And same things for physical activity infrastructures. There are a lot of things around this topic. So it's not really an individual behavior. So it's why we put that factors like a bit aside in the figure. Yes, one note also, you will see if you go through our paper that there are a lot of various interesting moderators of this effect. So I have one in mind, for example, that I can share. It's the effect of hurricanes on substance use. So for example, some researchers tested whether after like extreme weather event, you are more likely to increase your alcohol consumption. And they found it that actually, for example, spirituality could be an explanation of the effect. And if I remember well, in more spiritual communities, they were drinking a bit less than the less spiritual communities after an extreme weather event. So also something which is easy to understand is that chronic disease people, for example, will suffer more in general from the effect of like either behavioral shock or secular trends in climate change on their health behaviors. One which is very easy to understand and very well documented in the literature, it's air pollution, the effect of air pollution on people with respiratory disease. It's really something that trigger like a deterioration in sleep, deterioration in physical activity, more than in other population. So then I would like to discuss like the other part of this figure, which is not the effect of climate change on health behaviors, but how health behavior can contribute positively or negatively to climate change. So in the literature, it's most of the time organized around these two terms, mitigation and adaptation. I'm not sure whether it's explicit in, because obviously, you know, I'm not a native English speaker. You can notice that by my accent. And I'm not sure whether it's explicit or not for native English speaker, but basically mitigation is about trying to tackle, let's say, climate change, and while adaptation is more about how to live with it. And I would also like to discuss like a potential amplification role of health behavior here. So let's jump into it. In terms of mitigation, same, it's very clear in the literature, and actually the domain of environmental psychology have been quite proficient in this domain. There are two health behaviors that are really, really related to our individual environmental footprint, is meat consumption, and especially red meat consumption, and active transportation. So it's very interesting for us because if you take like all the actions that someone can undertake to decrease his own environmental footprint, among like the top 5 most important behaviors, there are health behaviors related to our health. So again, active transportation, and there is notably in the literature big things around very short trips, like less than 5 kilometers. It's really it should really be a target in terms of physical activity. And again, the consumption of red meat that should, in our countries at least, because it's not like equal in all parts of the world, but in our countries should decrease. High-income countries should decrease a lot. And again, I will discuss it during the equity part. In terms of adaptations, we found a lot of interesting things in the literature, and notably in the domain of physical activity. So there are like interesting example of programs or organized communities that can help, notably in post-natural disasters. So again, if you look at the preprint, you will see some papers describing how physical activity program in young adults being like in situation of anxiety, for example, after a post-natural disaster, can help coping with this situation. And there are also interesting paper about how physical activity communities can be directly ready to help and to provide support after post-natural disaster too. And also like some interesting work in the context of forced migration. And here it's more about sport than physical activity actually. It's also interesting to see that in the adaptation literature, there are some stuff that are close to environment, that health behaviors, but that we are maybe less used to study in the field of behavioral medicine and health psychology, and notably like gardening and environmental volunteering. So there are more and more papers documenting the co-benefits of this type of activity on the health of individuals, but also like the positive climate-related impact. So something we are explaining in this paper is that maybe thinking climate change in our field will also require to open ourselves to the promotion of new types of behaviors that was not part of our main focus before, like again, gardening or environmental volunteering that can have like co-benefits, interesting co-benefits. And also like some an emerging literature about the importance of sleep health to cope with notably like mental health issues related to climate change. Some stuff emerging in this field. And in terms of amplification, something also that I would like you to remember, one of the key messages I would say is that healthy doesn't mean sustainable. And sometimes by promoting like health behaviors, we are also like increasing the environmental impact of someone. There is an interesting paper in the literature talking about physical activity in a population of German adults. And actually they observe that for very active and very active participants, physical activity was a main driver of individuals' footprint, because we were discussing surfing, for example, with Sebastian before. And when you practice surfing, but most of the time you travel to surf and you drive and you fly, and this is like a major source of emission at the individual level. So it's tricky sometimes to promote health and sustainability at the same time. I have another example right now with one of the postdocs working with me. We are trying to assess the environmental impact of the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet is a type of diet which is very recommended in the literature in eating behaviors. But actually, some part of this diet might really increase the environmental impact of one's diet. So by adopting this diet, you improve your health basically, but you can also like you can deteriorate, if you want, your environmental impact. Your environmental impact can increase. So basically, yes, healthy doesn't mean sustainable, and it's sometimes difficult to articulate the two. In this preprint, we are proposing a different pro-environmental behavior definition. So sustainable healthy diet, pro-environmental physical activity. And I think that us as a field should adopt that type of definition now to make sure that we are not promoting behaviors that can actually have like an amplification effect on climate change by promoting something healthy. There is also like a brief paragraph in the paper which is about intervention modalities, and I think it's very relevant for the digital health domain, because sometimes the intervention type, so let's say for example like very digitalized versus not digitalized, can have an impact on the environmental impact of our intervention. And I think it's also very important before scaling up intervention to have like an understanding of, okay, my intervention is producing some effect in terms of health, but actually what's the environmental or ethical aspect and the consequence of this intervention modalities, and is it like really a positive impact to do these things in this way. So the last section is about integrating everything together. So as I told you, like it's a first framework, like we are not claiming, like a perfect and definitive model. It's something that should be improved over time, but we try to identify different mechanisms, different pathways that can help us understand the relationships between the two. Mitigation, adaptation, positive, negative effect, and again, behavioral shock, secular trends, direct and indirect effects. Something that could be interesting also to notice is that some behaviors are really into this feedback loop process. So if you take, for example, active transportation and air pollution, we know that at least in local places, the more there are air pollution, the less likely you are to take your bike, while at the same time, the more you will choose active transportation, the more you will cope with air pollution. So, it's really like a real feedback loop between air pollution and active transportation. While for other behaviors, it's a bit less the case. If you take, for example, sleep, climate change can have a lot of impact on sleep, but sleep is not like a mitigation behavior. Like you cannot use sleep to mitigate one's environmental footprint. So we are trying basically in this figure to put everything together and to start thinking these different relationships. Last things about health equity, because as I told you, it appeared to be, I was not really interested, to be honest, in that topic before starting to work on climate change. And by writing this paper, it appeared to us that it was like obvious that we should discuss it. So here it's a view on health equity, health behaviors, and climate change from 4 different angles. So something which is important to have in mind is that within countries, higher incomes means higher environmental footprint. So basically, there is a direct association. There is a perfect linear trend between incomes and environmental footprint. So the richer, the more is important your environmental footprint. Right? It's easy to understand. Like the more you have money, the more you can travel, the more you can buy goods, the bigger is your house, the bigger is this, and the bigger is that. So it's interesting because usually, we are more into targeting underserved population in behavioral medicine and health psychology. But actually, if we think about mitigation, the one that we should target are really like us, basically like the rich people in rich countries, because we have like the best and the major impact on climate change. So in terms of intervention, it's very important to understand. And in terms of adaptation, something which is also crucial to get is that lower incomes means more vulnerability. Again, one example that pop up and that we present in this paper is a study in San Francisco showing that people that do not have cars are more likely to use like active transportation, but they are also using active transportation when they don't have the choice. And for example, during heat waves, and they are more subject to get impacted by heat through active transportation, comparing to people that can travel by car and just switch on the air conditioning. So again, lower incomes equal to more vulnerability. So in terms of adaptation, maybe we have like the necessity to focus on vulnerable people. While about mitigation, it's clearly like the higher incomes population that needs to be targeted. It's a bit the same between countries. So we know that the top 10% of high-income countries are leading the global greenhouse gas emission. So it means that, for example, when I was discussing this concept of sustainable diet and reduction in red meat, actually it's mainly for us. It's not something that in other parts of the world, in like lower income country, a small increase in meat could be still, like sustainable. So again, it's like I was saying before, the mitigation intervention should really be focused on the high income countries. And just to give you like some scale, because it's always scary to think about it, but it's also something that helped me to think about the scale of the issue. You can see here, so it's quite difficult to compute, but the average carbon footprint of someone in Australia, US, or Canada is around 15 or 17 tons of CO2 per person and per year. And if we want to meet the Paris Agreement, it should be decreased around 2 tons of CO2. So basically, like the lifestyle of Cuba right now is compatible with the achievement of the Paris Agreement. So just to give you scale about the the change that we have to initiate. It's very, very important. Another one that is very important, and it's about like the intergenerational level. Recently in Science, we have seen a paper documenting this fact and saying that children born in 2020 will experience a 2 to 7-fold increase in extreme events compared with people born in the 60s. So the point is that we are, by our inaction, because clearly we are starting some action, but it's insufficient because it's a fact, like greenhouse gas emissions are increasing and we are not like escaping from this. By our inaction, we are putting all the pressure on the next generation. And that's something, because at the same time, we are depleting all the resources. So basically, they will have to do better than us in a more unstable world with less cheap resources. So you can see, I think, the effect of the war in Ukraine right now on the energy system. It really needs like small perturbation in the system to create more instability at the worldwide level. So it's really not a gift for the kids today, and it's something where I think psychology can contribute with all the effect of. Sorry, I don't remember the concept, delay discounting, I think, and all these things about how you think about the future and you integrate the future. And the last one is about gender and sex. So there are some papers saying that the impact of climate change could be like specific to women and men. Actually, I put it gender, but I'm more aware of the literature on sex, so the difference between men and women. And for example, we know that there are perturbations in the timing of menarche, which are the first menstrual cycle, via food and environmental pollution. So there are also like potentially some differences to think when developing intervention between like climate change and health behaviors to target like women and men differently. So here we are. I hope that it was a relatively clear, big picture of this paper that, again, I hope should be published relatively soon in Annals of Behavioral Medicine. The final paper is quite different from the preprint and like way shorter. So if you like the topic and if you want like the full details about it, I recommend to read the preprint actually more than the last paper, because the different editorial decision like cut a lot the paper, which I can understand, but at the end it's not exactly the same. And in this paper, again, you will find a lot of references about these different sections. So on one end, impact of climate change on health behaviors. And here also, let me tell you that, because it's something that I had to address in reviewers' comment, there are very few studies. I mean, this field it's in infancy, because most of the climate change researchers so far, so for example, my colleagues in East Global, they are not directly interested in health behaviors. They are interested in mortality. They are interested in hospitalizations, but they are not interested in the effect of pollution or climate change on health behavior. So I think that health psychology and behavioral medicine should really contribute to this section too. Like documenting a bit more how people adapt to climate change. What is the impact of climate change on health behaviors? Because again, climate change and health scientists, they were more focused so far on hospitalization and mortality. And then again, as I told you, like the different points around mitigation, adaptation, etc. So one of the key messages of this paper and my talk today is, again, as I told you at the beginning, to start like building bridge between fields. I mean, if it's of interest to you, it was of interest to me. Maybe if you are here today, it should be of interest to you. And to help this, we try to provide an updated definition of what could be health-related behaviors into this planetary health framework, and acknowledging that when we promote health behaviors, we also need to promote planetary health. And by this, like trying to not create like amplification effects. So I will not read it because it's quite long, but basically we try to integrate all the things that I discussed before. So basically promoting behaviors that have positive effect on health, but also like neutral or positive impact on the environment, and also with like the the equity mindset into it. I tried also to provide some other key messages, and actually that's fun because each time I'm presenting this work, I'm not saying the same. So it's things are changing, but maybe something that I could say is that we are good at evaluating the health impact of behavioral intervention. So it's the core things that we know how to manage. And maybe now we need to integrate secondary order effects. And, we need to think more about the social, ethical, and environmental effect of what we promote, and especially in the digital health domain, because as I discussed before in the introduction, health digitalization has a cost also in terms of the environmental impact. Sometimes it can be positive, but sometimes it can be negative. And it's very important to have this in mind, I think, before scaling up very large scale digital health things or accelerating all type of digital health initiatives. And also something that, again, I already said, but it's important, healthiness is not always aligned with sustainability. And it's very complex sometimes to promote something which is healthy and sustainable at the same time. We are working about this topic in the food domain right now with one of the postdoc working with me, and really it's tricky to achieve like all of them together. One example, if you take like quinoa, that is very famous right now as like a green protein. So it's healthy, it's relatively sustainable because to grow is it's not that bad in terms of pesticides and all the stuff. But in terms of the ethical and social consideration, it's quite horrible for the population that were eating quinoa for a while and they cannot afford to eat it again. So again, just to say that each time, I like these pictures actually from this paper. Each time you push a lever, there might have like rebound effect or secondary effect somewhere. And I have the feeling, maybe I'm wrong, but I have the feeling that it's even more true in the domain of climate change. So, having in mind these things when promoting something is very important. Maybe a last message on this. Me, for example, because, you sometimes you can be, it's difficult to split your mind when you are like in the digital health domain and also in the climate change one, because like clearly it's two worlds that are not communicating well together. And something I try to do, for example, is in my papers, I'm using digital health all the time, and it's changing the way I can observe and understand behaviors in context, etc. But I'm not always promoting digital health. And it's, I try to be a bit more sober in my expectations in terms of digital health. And yes, it can be very useful to understand a lot of things, but I'm not sure that every type of digital health solution to be promoted at large scale every time, because again, when you ponderate the health effect with other type of effects, it's a bit more tricky. Thank you for your attention. Some other papers. So as I told you, this preprint online, our paper on the digital health domain, the work by Paquito, and the specific one that we did about physical activity and sports. And also like a big thanks to all my co-authors, so Eric Eckler and Dawn from the US. I'm also thinking to Olga. I don't know if she's there today. No, she's not. And Paquito, obviously. Vera is also part of your network. So yeah, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. That was a really nice presentation, really, really interesting. And of course, if you wanted to share the preprint paper that you were telling us about, you can share it with me. And when I make the recording available, I can also link to that so that people can find their way to that. But yeah, very interesting talk, and it makes me think a lot about and a lot of the conversations that are taking place in the surf space that we were discussing before, where there's actually a lot of greenwashing going on with companies saying they are very green and promoting this healthy sport, but in fact the industry is very not green, with championship tours traveling around the world and surfers using all of these material surfboards that don't last very long at all, made from petrol. So a lot of rethinking has to take place in order to address some of the things that you've been talking about.
Yeah,
As
actually,
a
it's just
surfer, where
one
it's a group of people that people think about, oh, they're in connection with nature and all of those things, and then we don't really hold up to those standards.
yeah, it can help. It can help because like there are some papers saying that the more you spend time in natural environments, the more you are likely to to start engage with different like environmental things. So it might be related, but it's true that in the sports domain and every domain today, like greenwashing is quite crazy. I've been interviewed by the European Commission recently about sports and climate change, and I was in a panel with different person, and that was, yes, pretty fun to see. I like the different position, and basically my message was that the most sustainable sports event that you can have is the sports event that you don't have, and it's difficult to understand. And obviously, at the economical level, it's not super sexy, but it is what it is, and yeah, it's.
But yeah, I would like to open it up to everyone. Do you have any questions, any comments, contributions, any thoughts? Jan.
Yes, thank you, Guillaume. Very interesting. I really enjoyed your talk, and I also was there last year. I have a question regarding air pollution. So I really, I also, worked on it in the last months, and its link between active transportation or physical activity. So my question is also, as a health psychologist trying to promote health behaviors, how can we make it visible for people, whether their air is polluted or not, or how much, because at the spot where the person is, you don't have a number for an air pollution number, maybe for the district or so. And also in terms of biochemical stuff, it's very complicated. And there also, like, I talked to a professor on that, trying to embed it in our email studies. That's why I wanted to ask you whether you know how to find a way how to make it kind of visible to people, what like air pollution is there, and how to embed it in health behavior change interventions.
Yes, thank you. But it's again, this is a great example of a rebound effect and secondary order effect, because there are studies showing that when you communicate on like pollution alerts, for example, people will decrease their physical activity level, especially in the active transportation domain. And again, it's difficult to think about it because people will travel less. So maybe they will take their car, and it's even worse in terms of air pollution then. And also there are studies showing that there is one recent, which is very interesting. Basically, the effect of air pollution on sleep was mediated by high physical activity level, and especially active transportation. So meaning that in urban environments, the more you take your bike, the more you are exposed to air pollution, and the more you might have like detrimental effects. So at the end, what do you promote? It's infinite, and that's quite tricky to handle. And Jan, I can only recommend you to check some papers by one of the leading researchers on that domain, and I have the chance to work with him. He's in his global. It's Mark Nieuwenhuizen. I don't know if this name is difficult to pronounce for me, but I can share with you some papers. You will not have like any difficulties to find, because it's one of the top 5 most cited researchers in the world, and they are developing a lot of relatively like easy data set to use to document, track, and monitor air pollution and different things, but mainly air pollution in a lot of different cities in Europe. So maybe there are some resources that you can use here. And really, I don't have any solution about that, because it's again, it's always balancing the risk and the benefits, and it's difficult, but it's a good example of what all these different secondary order effects.
Yeah, thank you very much. Cool to share it. I like, maybe I finished my thinking in this kind of field, because we thought that maybe so as researchers we know the correlations, and then we find that air pollution is leading to health